Defense Against Infectious Disease Part 2, Vaccinations. So in today's clip we're going to have a little look back at the work that we've done previously on our natural immunity and how our bodies protect itself, and then we're going to look at how we can build immunity through vaccinations. So when we look at the word immunity, I want us to particularly look at natural immunity. So from the previous clips, we know that a bacteria can invade our body. They reproduce really rapidly, but on the outside they've got these things called antigens. Alright, and the antigens are the things that make us ill. Now, one of the things I don't think I covered in the last clip, or didn't make a point of, was that antigens are made by pathogens. Okay, so that word is linked. Be really careful, because they do like to try and trip you up with the words in your exams. So an antigen is made by a pathogen, alright? And our bodies make antibodies. Now if you remember, what happens when our body makes an antibody, spelled that wrong, is our bodies then remember it. They have these memory cells, so that if that bacteria, that pathogen, infects us again or gets into our body, it knows which antibody to make. It doesn't have to go through that process of making all the different antibodies and see which one fits or doesn't fit. It knows which one it needs to make, so it stops the bacteria or the pathogen before it's able to reproduce and infect us and become ill. So that's natural immunity that we covered previously. What we need to look at now is vaccinations. So we're going to have a closer look at what's actually in there. Okay, so we have vaccinations for lots of different reasons and lots of different types of vaccinations. So what's actually inside the vaccination is a dead or weakened form of a pathogen. Alright, so I've just taken a bacteria. You can see it's not looking too happy. But what's really important about this is, even though it's dead or weakened, our white blood cells still recognise it as an invader, and they will fight it off. And they particularly look at the antigens on the outside. Alright, and as we know, white blood cells go away and they produce, very cleverly for us, these antibodies. Alright, and the antibodies cover them and stop them from producing the chemicals and allow them to clump together. Alright, so it comes along and it produces antibodies. Now, because it's done that, this is a dead or weakened pathogen, so it's not likely to make us ill. There's a slight chance of some side effects with them, but only a really mild dosage of the illness that you would get if you got it for real. Okay, it's produced those antibodies. Your body now knows what to do if it gets infected for real, if it comes across that disease, and it can fight it off really quickly. Now, it's really important that it can fight it off quickly, because they protect us from any possible future infections. So examples of things that we're protected from are polio. Okay, we've got something called MMR, TB. Okay, now I'm unlucky enough to have come across polio and TB myself. My mum had polio, and at a very young age, into being a teenager, she was actually paralysed from the neck down. She now has all sorts of problems with her legs and her joints, different size feet, all sorts. She's lucky she's not paralysed anymore, but it was definitely a really major part of her life, especially as, well, my mum's in early 60s now, and she had to live away as a child. She had to live in Wales, because that was the only facility that could treat her. Right? And since we introduced the polio vaccination, you don't hear of anybody having polio now. Okay, you just might hear of your grandmas or your granddads or people like that that previously had polio. And the same is true with TB, which is tuberculosis. Now, I did say that this is another one that I'd had experience of. I actually had tuberculosis when I was a child, and it led to all sorts of problems with my lungs. I actually ended up developing asthma because I had problems breathing. Okay, But again, tuberculosis isn't something that you hear about people having anymore. And MMR is the one that we're going to concentrate on the most. MMR is one of the most controversial vaccines. Lots of people choose not to have it. So, if we have a look at MMR, what's really important is that we know what MMR actually stands for. So, it's for measles. So it protects us against measles, it protects us against mumps, and rubella. Now I'm not going to go into detail about each of those. If you want to know anything else about them, go away and research them online. The one that I am going to talk to you about is measles. Now measles is one that can cause all sorts of really major problems. It can cause you to die, it can cause serious brain trauma, there's something called encephalitis. It can cause you to become breath. I don't know why I said that. It can cause you to become deaf, which is what I was aiming for before, and even blind. So there's loads of things that are connected to measles. So measles is perhaps the worst of the three. Alright, now MMR previously was linked by some scientists to autism. Now just so you have an idea of what autism is basically a condition which, as it says here, ranges in severity and it affects a person's social and personal interaction skills. You can have everything from somebody that just hasn't got very much empathy, doesn't really understand your feelings, to somebody that literally can't interact. I have a friend whose son is autistic and he still doesn't speak and he's 10 years old. He murmurs to himself, but they're not words, it's just kind of humming to himself. And the only way that he does do any sort of communication is that he does a little bit of sign language. So you've got everything from people that would talk to you almost normally to somebody that can't even speak at all. Alright, now these scientists linked MMR and autism together, and that caused a huge amount of backlash. I'm going to read to you, or I'll put up on here, a little bit about, it's actually an exam question, but it's all quite correct. So we know what autism is, but there was this bloke called Dr. Andrew Wakefield, and he published this report that basically said that yes, autism and MMR vaccine are most probably linked. Okay, they've found this quite possible link. Now their study, they carried out the tests, and the tests they carried out were only on 12 autistic children. Alright, so they carried out tests on 12 autistic children, and when he came out and said that there was this big problem and that MMR and autism were linked, lots and lots of people decided that they weren't going to have their children vaccinated, and the reason for that was that the newspapers used parts of the reports in scare stories, so parents just refused to have their children vaccinated. Well, I understand that, I'm a parent myself, and understand that if there's that chance that it could cause autism, maybe I don't want to go down that route, but you need to weigh up the dangers of not having it as well, and I told you just some of the dangers of measles. Right, now what was quite interesting is that it was found later that Dr. Wakefield's research was actually being funded through solicitors for the 12, okay, so funded through solicitors for the 12 children. Right, so his work has been pretty much discredited, right, and the reason for that is because basically it's biased, isn't it? If I was being paid, okay, and that my job was to find that link, then I would go out and deliberately find a link, and I guess maybe he got paid more, I don't know. Okay, I like to think that my principles are a little bit higher than that, and that I wouldn't go out and just say that there was if there wasn't. Alright, so that question with all that information on, they could ask you various different questions. They could ask you about the link between it, whether they thought it was something that was possibly biased and why it would be biased, whether you thought that it was creditable research. So there's quite a number of questions that you could be answering on that one. Okay, so another one that comes up, another really popular type of question, is one where it shows you a graph. Alright, so this one's about in the 1990s, the Japanese government stopped using the MMR vaccine because they thought it was linked to autism. Alright, so here we can see that all of these are the numbers of the MMR vaccine being given out, and these ones, let me just change my colour, this bit is the number of kids that actually had autism. Right, so you can see after 1994, okay, 1994 was the last year, just move that out of the way, that kids in Japan were given the MMR vaccine. Alright, now we move it on. The actual question was, does the graph support the theory that the MMR vaccination caused autism? So I'm going to let you have an attempt at answering that. Okay, if you want to stop now. Okay, so if you've stopped the clip and you're wanting to go through the answer, so the points were that it clearly doesn't, right? At the beginning you can see that the number of MMR vaccinations given to children was really high, but actually the number of children who were developing autism was relatively low, alright? It was actually at one of the lowest points on the graph, and it did peak during the point where they were having MMR vaccinations. But actually, their highest peak, the point at which children were developing autism, was after the vaccinations had been stopped. And remember, the link was saying that they were developing autism really quickly after they'd had the injection. Some parents are saying that it's days and only weeks afterwards. Okay? So, final bit then. What's going to happen if we stop vaccinating? Alright, so let's make this really simple. If I take no, I don't want that bit, sorry guys, let's just bring the pen up. Okay, so if I take people that have been vaccinated, so the people that are black have all been vaccinated. Alright, quite happy, they haven't got measles, nothing's being passed on. Okay, and this one person does have measles. Okay, maybe they've come from another country, maybe they've just been really unlucky. Alright, so they've ended up with measles. Now, that's okay. That one person has measles, but none of those other people are going to get it because they've got an immunity to it. Okay, so they don't get it. Right, let's make it so that all of these people in green are not vaccinated. Oh, use a bit sideways. Okay, so all the people in green aren't vaccinated. You can see that that one person now, this one person here that does have measles, is going to have quite a dramatic effect because all those people don't have an immunity to it. They've no natural immunity, they've no immunity through vaccinations, so they end up with a very real possibility of getting measles. So the number of people that are going to be hospitalised, etc., are going to increase. Alright,